Hello. Steve Parish is here.
Good evening and welcome to this evening's Development Management Committee meeting. I am Joan Grime, Councillor for Culture, Glaisbury and Croft, and I will be chairing the meeting. Due to the current coronavirus pandemic, the Council have taken steps to follow restrictions and health guidance in relation to social distancing, whilst balancing the needs of carrying out our regulatory functions. This is the 12th meeting of this committee that is being held remotely. The agenda for the meeting will run as per the usual format. The meeting is being broadcast live to the public who have had the opportunity to make written representations which have been distributed to members. However, there will be no input from the public during the meeting. This is in line with the Coronavirus Act of 2020, Section 78. Present at the meeting are elected Borough Councillors plus officers of Warrington Borough Council. I will now ask all those present to introduce themselves. Will councillors also confirm that they have received the agenda and reports on the applications and have a copy in front of them? An update report has also been circulated and are available for members to view. So if you could confirm that now, Councillor Barr.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Barr. I represent Lynn North and Selwall. I have the papers in front of me and I have the update report and I've read the other representations.
Councillor Carey.
Good evening, I'm Peter Carey. I represent Fairfield and Howley Ward. I confirm I've received all the papers and updates and I have them in front of me.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Flaherty. I also represent Fairfield and Howley, and I confirm that I have all the papers and the updates on the table in front of me.
Thank you. Councillor Friend.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Graham Friend. I represent Pulton North. I have all the papers on the laptop in front of me and I've read and understood them. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy. Councillor McCarthy, are you with us?
Yes, can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can now.
Good evening, yes. I have all the papers and I've read those and I've also received all the updates. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Chair,
yes.
I'm getting double sound all the while. Everything's repeating itself. So when you were doing the introduction, everything was over speaking it, so I was repeating everything twice.
Same here.
Yes, and I can hear feedback as well. Can we have assistance from the IT people on this?
I think there is, Chair. I'm looking at the chat and somebody's been muted.
Okay.
Whoever dialed in by telephone is watching the live feed as well, so it's coming through.
Okay.
So I've muted them now.
We seem to be sorted now. Yeah. Councillor Morgan.
Good evening, Councillor Les Morgan, representing Latchford West. I have all the relevant paperwork in front of me and all is understood. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Karen Mundry from Latchford East. I have all the papers and updates in front of me. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Parish.
Good evening, Chair. I'm on the phone. It might have been me with the speakers because I'm trying to do it online as well, but it's a few seconds behind. So, and I can't find the button on that, but I am here by the phone and I've read all the papers.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
Good evening, I'm Judith Wheeler, Councillor for Appleton, Hatton, Stretton and Higher Walton, and I can confirm I've read the papers and the updates and I've got them in front of me here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wright.
Hello, Councillor Steve Wright, Latchford, representing UC White Cross. I've read all the papers and I've got them in front of me. Thank you.
Thank you. I will also ask the officers to introduce themselves. From Democratic Services, Jenny.
Good evening, Jenny Cordwell, Senior Democratic Services Officer.
And Katie.
Good evening, Katie Halliwell, Democratic Services Officer.
Okay, Legal Services. Paul, are you with us from Legal Services? Saw you before. I'll come back to Paul Clisby. From Planning, Nikki.
Nikki Gallagher, Development Manager.
Thank you. And Matt.
Hi, Matt Carney, Major Applications Team Leader.
And Transport.
Thanks, Chair. Mike Taylor, Highways Development Control.
Thank you. Is Paul Clisby back with us now?
Paul's offline.
Paul's offline.
Sorry?
Paul isn't with us at the moment. He's offline, so he must be trying to access the meeting.
Okay, I hope he's back on before we need him. Right, agenda item 1 is apologies. Have we got any apologies, Jenny?
No apologies have been received.
Okay, item 2 is declarations of interest. Members are reminded of their responsibility to declare any disclosable pecuniary or non-pecuniary interest which they have in any item of business on the agenda, no later than when that item is reached. Can I ask you individually, Councillor Barr?
Nothing to declare.
Thank you. Councillor Carey?
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Councillor Flaherty?
Nothing to declare.
Councillor Friend?
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy?
Chair, I'm struggling with this. Everything is repeating itself twice. Sorry, Chair, the sound. Whoever's speaking, it's all repeating itself twice over. So the whole conversation is completely distorted for me. You're saying something, then it's repeating itself when it moved on to something else.
That seems to me.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Repeating itself all the while.
Is anyone else getting repeats?
No, not now, Chair. No.
No.
A possible reason is that you've also got it online, because it goes out online with a very slight delay compared to what's happening at the Teams meeting. Can any of the IT people assist with what's happening?
And I have nothing to declare anywhere.
Thank you.
I can, Chair. Yeah, I'll remote through to Councillor McCarthy's screen now and try to sort it out. But I won't be able to change the videos while I'm doing it, so I'll just put the PowerPoint presentation live while you're all speaking. If that's okay.
All right. Thank you. Let's hope that sorts itself out, Tony.
Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morgan.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Mundry.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Councillor Parish. Councillor Parish, are you with us? I'll come back to Steve. Councillor Wheeler.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, the second item we're discussing tonight, 2020-36311 Newhouse Farm, Hatton Lane. I'm one of the ward councillors for this ward. I also have made a strong objection to this planning application, which still remains, so I will not take part in any of the discussions for that item. Thank you, Chair.
All right, so you can leave the meeting when that comes up by muting the mic and the video for the duration of the item.
Yeah, thank you, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Wright.
Nothing to declare, Chair.
Good, thank you. I also have no disclosable interest in any item. Is Councillor Parish back with us? is on the phone, so maybe he's lost the connection, hopefully temporarily.
Can you hear me?
Yes. Have you got any item of interest to declare?
I have nothing to declare.
All right, thank you. Item 3 is the minutes of the last meeting. Has any member seen a problem with the minutes of the meeting on the 21st of October, which have been circulated to you? Right, I take that to mean there are none, so I confirm that the minutes of the DMC meeting held on the 21st of October 2020 are a correct record. Item 4 is planning applications, and we go on to the first planning application, number 2020-36337. This is the Friends Lane Stables, Friends Lane, Penketh, Warrington, WA5 3LE. It's full planning for a major application, a proposed extension to the existing reception building, including a disabled toilet with solar panels in the roof, 3 additional stables, construction of a new indoor riding arena building over the site of the existing outdoor menage, the construction of a new outdoor menage, 12 additional parking spaces and associated external lighting, fencing and landscaping. The recommendation is to refuse. Can I invite the Development Manager to present a report?
Thank you, Councillor Graham. Before I start on this item, I just want to make sure we've just got a new arrival on the call with us. I'm just checking that Paul's available now. Paul, have you joined?
Yes, I have.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, so the application at Friends Lane Stables, members may recall that this application for additional stables, indoor riding arena, additional parking area and ancillary facilities was previously considered by DMC earlier this year on the 10th of June. At that time, the application was deferred for 3 reasons. Firstly, to allow the applicant the opportunity to evidence how the proposal would support outdoor activity, and specifically in relation to Greenbelt policy. Secondly, to allow the applicant the opportunity to evidence how the proposal would provide the opportunity for disabled riders, and potentially in relation to very special circumstances. And thirdly, for officers to suggest conditions for the consideration of members should they be minded to approve the application contrary to officers' view. The subsequent engagement with the applicant has led to the submission of amended plans, and these have resulted in a traditional indoor riding arena building of 20.5 metres by 44.5 metres with a maximum height of 5.5 metres above ground level without bunding and with the inclusion of an outdoor menage, which wasn't in the previous application. The site is currently operating as a riding school and is within the Greenbelt, and there's currently stables and a hay store on site. The application was originally put before members due to a call in by Councillor Keane due to its location within the Greenbelt. In addition, 5 objections were received due to the impact on the Greenbelt, residential amenity and concerns over highway safety. 52 letters of support have been submitted for reasons including community benefits and the provision of enhanced facilities for people with disabilities. Further to the submission of the amended plans following the previous DMC, the application was subject to re-notification in the form of neighbour letters. 1 further objection has been received on the basis of need, that the arena is not required and there is an Olympic-sized all-weather arena close by, the impact on the Greenbelt and the precedent that this would set. 1 further letter of support was received on the basis that this is a great opportunity for a thriving family-run local business to develop and expand to meet the needs of growing customer base. Full details of the representations are contained within section 4 of your report, and the update note circulated earlier today details 2 further representations that have been received in support of the application, and these from the Chief Executive of the Riding for the Disabled Association and the Group Chairperson of the Camsley Grange Riding for the Disabled Group. As members are aware, all planning applications must be determined in accordance with the local planning policies unless other material considerations indicate otherwise. The relevant local planning policies contained within the core strategy are contained within section 7 of the report. The key issues associated with development are discussed in section 9 of this report, and for the purposes of this presentation, I'll focus on the principle of the proposed development in the Greenbelt, highway safety, residential amenity, design and impact on the character of the area, and residential living conditions and ecology. And I'll take each of these in turn, focusing firstly on the principle of development. The core strategy, policies within the core strategy refer to the National Planning Policy Framework, and these require local planning authorities to ensure that substantial weight is given to any harm to the green belt in considering applications. It further states that new buildings should be considered inappropriate in the green belt unless it meets with an exception specified within the framework. Two of these exceptions are stated are relevant to this application, are stated within the report in paragraph 9.2. Firstly, appropriate facilities for outdoor sport and recreation, as long as these preserve the openness of the green belt and do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. And secondly, the development of previously developed land, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. And we'll look now at the details that sit behind this in relation to this application. So in relation to the first of these points, the applicant contends that the development would support the existing use of the site for outdoor sport and recreation. However, as evident within the discussion in the report, it's the officer's view that it is not an appropriate facility for outdoor sport and recreation within the terms of the exceptions policy, because the proposed indoor arena would not be ancillary to that primary function. It would effectively become the primary function of the site, providing potential year-round indoor sport and recreational facilities, and therefore is not appropriate for outdoor sport and recreation. However, the consideration of its appropriateness is only one element of that first point listed within paragraph 9.2. The development would still need to preserve the openness of the green belt and not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. This principle was also applied to the second previously mentioned exception, the development of previously developed land, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. It is accepted that the proposed new buildings would be on previously developed land, although the replacement menage would not. There are two matters to consider in relation to openness. They are the spatial element, its volume, its area, its height, and its visual impact. In relation to the visual impact on the openness of the green belt, it is necessary to consider factors such as the impact on long-range views, visual links to this area of land to the wider green belt, and intervisibility between settlements. It is considered that siting of the proposal, particularly the indoor arena, would be significant and moderate. The impacts would be significant, and moderate weight should be given to this. In spatial terms, the scale of the proposed development, with specific reference to the arena, is considered to be such that it should be attributed substantial negative weight in terms of its impact on the openness of the green belt. It is also necessary to consider whether the proposal will conflict with the purpose of including land within the green belt, and it's considered that in this instance it does, in terms of its impact on urban sprawl, although again this is harmful but not significant. Taking all these points into account, the application would result in harm to the green belt by means of impact on openness, and so, in accordance with the NPPF, substantial weight should be attached to this element of the proposal. The application is considered inappropriate within the green belt. It does not meet with the exceptions test identified, and is therefore necessary to consider whether there are any very special circumstances existing that would clearly outweigh the harm of the proposal to the impacts of the green belt. The applicant has put forward three very special circumstances that are primarily related to the provision of facilities for riders with disabilities, socio-economic benefits, and the reduced reliance on carbon fuels, and these are provided in detail in your report. But in terms of the future provision for disabled riders, the applicant states that there is a potential agreement between them and Camsley Grange RDA to use riding sessions for 17 disabled riders who no longer have fixed premises due to the closure of their previous base in January 2020. Furthermore, the applicant states that there are currently 21 disabled children and adults utilising the site that already attend for regular sessions. Should a Camsley Grange RDA utilise the site, this will bring additional benefits such as a mounting ramp, which would support the integration of all riders. Whilst officers agree that positive weight could be attributed to this factor, this is reduced on the basis there is no contract in place and there are no controls that can be administered to ensure that this benefit will be realised. The socio-economic benefits referenced by the applicant relate to the enhanced customer experience and additional for part-time jobs. Enhanced customer experience is considered to be given very limited weight in terms of very special circumstances, while some positive weight can be given to job creation. The application proposes to reduce reliance on carbon fuels by integrating solar panels into the proposed development. This would serve the proposed development and is therefore given very limited weight. In conclusion of this section, where it is considered that there is harm to the green belt, as in this instance, this will be given substantial weight in accordance with national policy. It is necessary to consider if any other harm results from the proposal before assessing whether very special circumstances exist to outweigh the level of harm identified, and therefore we need to look at all of the material considerations. In terms of the impact on the highway and highway safety more generally, the application proposes sufficient off-street car parking to deal with resultant demand, and visibility displays are sufficient to access and egress the site safely. It is recognised that in the past there has been on-street parking associated with the facility. However, there is no reason why the application would exacerbate that current situation. The application would not result in a significant adverse impact on highway safety and is therefore accepted in these terms when assessed against local planning policy. The proposed development is some 40 metres from the nearest residential property, and therefore it would not have an adverse impact on the neighbours by reason of proximity or privacy. Whilst the development would lead to a more intensive use of the site, operation will be confined within sociable hours, and it is considered that the impacts of noise and general disturbance would not have a significant adverse impact. In terms of design and impact on the character of the area, the functional appearance of the building is typical for its use. Glimpse views are possible through the main built structures, but the main built structures of height would be set sufficiently within the site that they would not have an overbearing impact on the street scene and would not adversely impact on the visual amenity of the area. And finally, in terms of ecology, the potential impact on ecology, specifically bats, as a result of the development is considered to be low, is therefore acceptable in these terms. In terms of the planning balance then, the NPPF at paragraph 1.43 indicates that inappropriate development is, by definition, harmful to the green belt and should not be approved except in very special circumstances. At paragraph 144, it confirms that very special circumstances will not exist unless a potential harm to the green belt by reason of its inappropriateness and any other harm arising from the proposal is clearly outweighed by other considerations. The extension to the reception building, the extension to form 3 new stables and hard standing would be low impact additions to the site in visual and spatial terms and is considered to be appropriate in themselves in their support for existing outdoor recreational use and are considered to be acceptable in greenbelt terms. The harm to the greenbelt by way of inappropriateness and spatial openness results from the indoor riding arena building, and this, however, can carry substantial weight. The totality of other considerations, such as the potential to offer riding for disabled persons, investments in the local economy and some additional part-time employment, the proposed use of solar panels can be afforded some weight, but together do not clearly outweigh harm to the green belt as required in the consideration of very special circumstances. As such, the development will conflict with the NPPF and the part of the core strategy policy CS5, which requires compliance with the NPPF insofar as greenbelt matters are concerned. The application is therefore recommended for refusal due to its impact on greenbelt, as detailed on page 33 of the report. It is noticed that members requested a list of draft conditions should they be minded to take a different view from that presented by officers. These are included within Appendix 1 of the report for your information. While the local planning authority is no longer required to give reasons for approval on decision notices, in accordance with government advice, it is important that paperwork that supports such decisions clearly shows how that decision has been reached. It is therefore recommended that should members take a different view from that presented tonight, then the associated reason is minuted, and I would respectfully refer you to the requirements when making a decision as set out within paragraph 7.1 of the report, which is unfortunately duplicated in paragraph 7.2, with specific regard to the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Nikki. I can confirm that we received additional written representations from Mr. A. Hales in support of the application. I will now ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood these representations. Councillor Barr.
Read and understood, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carey.
I confirm, Chair.
Councillor Flaherty.
Confirm, Chair.
Councillor Friend.
Confirm, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy.
Yeah, Chair, yes, Chair. I'm sorry, Chair, but I'm still getting double sound all the while. It's virtually impossible for me to follow this because I'm still hearing the officer's voice. So it's running a couple of minutes behind what she's saying. So I'm really struggling to keep up with this.
Yes, I was just going to ask you how it was still going. I can only refer again to the IT technical help that we've got with us. It must be the feedback from the online copy of the meeting that runs a little bit after the Teams.
I mean, I have read the document. I have read the documentation, but it is. I just couldn't follow what Nikki was saying.
All right. Paul Clisby, have you got anything to put in from the legal point of view if Tony couldn't hear?
Well, Chair, I would. I mean, clearly, all that, as far as I understand it, all that Nikki has done is to sort of summarise and her report. So I don't think there's any new information. I mean, clearly, if there were new information or new guidance, obviously it's important that every member is making the decision on the same basis. But as far as I understand it, and perhaps Nikki could confirm, I don't think that there's anything that's sort of radically new arising out of the it's basically a summary and of the report that you have before you, which Councillor McCarthy obviously has had access to, and as I understand it, has read it.
So that's correct, Chair. So all I've done there is just pulled out some main points from the report that are contained within the report. So the information is there in front of Councillor McCarthy. My query back to Paul, unfortunately, would be the position should this situation continue and Councillor McCarthy isn't able to take part in the debate.
While he's speaking now, Nikki, I'm still listening to the solicitor speaking.
Sorry, what did you say, Tony? That you could hear
while Nikki's speaking.
Okay. Yeah.
I can still hear Nikki speaking, and when Nikki first broke in, Paul was still speaking. So the whole conversation is running about 30 seconds behind all the while behind the speaker. So it's impossible to follow it.
Yeah. I think when we reach the end of the conversation, I just have to ask you if you feel able to vote.
Yeah, okay.
Unless,
well, I've read the documentation, Chair.
Yeah.
It's just when people are speaking, it's running about at least half a minute behind, and that's so it's I can't follow. It's hard to follow it. But I've read the documentation, so I feel confident that I can make a decision when it comes to a vote.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And perhaps IT will continue to try and resolve the situation.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Chair. Sorry, Chair, can I just ask, so is that only in relation to officers, or is that in relation to everyone? Is Councillor McCarthy hearing other members in that way?
Yes, I think Councillor McCarthy is hearing the whole meeting twice with about half a minute in between. So in other words, he's getting the meeting as it goes out to the web as well as the Teams meeting.
Yes.
Sorry, Councillor Morgan, did I ask you if you've read and understood the representations?
Read and understood, Chair.
Thank you. Sorry, back to you, Tony.
Yeah, whoever speaks, Chair, then once they've finished speaking and the next speaker starts, I can still hear the previous speaker. So if you're speaking to me now, Joan, and the second speaker comes in about 30 seconds later, I'm still listening to you. So it's completely out of sync.
Yeah. Yes. So hopefully IT can try to resolve it.
Councillor McCarthy, I'll be back. I'll remote back to your screen in 1 minute. I'm just trying to help Councillor Parish at the moment.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mundry.
Confirm, Chair.
Right, Councillor Parish.
I confirm, Chair.
Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, I've confirmed, read and understood, Chair.
Councillor Wright.
Confirm, Chair.
And I've also read the representations. We received updates quite late on this afternoon, and Nikki has referred to some of those, but I've got down here a couple of more points which I think are important in relation to the case for very special circumstances. And I would like to point these out because I'm not sure if everyone's had a chance to look at them. Nicky's already told us that they lost their last venue in Glazebrook, but the letter gives details of 5 riding schools and centres in Warrington that the Camsley Grange riding group have approached without success. The nearest other places, as far out as Mid-Cheshire, are already fully subscribed, so they have made considerable efforts to find a place. They have got an agreement with Friends Lane. Friends Lane have reserved Monday evenings for them, and this has been approved for their use by the Disabled Riding Association. Nikki explained to us that the problem from the point of view of officers is they can't have a contract or controls, but they do still have a substantial arrangement, and it's going to be up to you as members of the committee to make a judgment on whether that situation is sufficient to be very special circumstances. So as far as I'm seeing things with what's come in this afternoon, that seems to be the critical situation. Before I invite comments from members, do you want to come back to that comment, Nikki?
Well, insofar, Councillor Grimes, just to clarify that that is the case. So the information that Camsley Grange has submitted today is material to decision, so you can take it into account. In terms of whether that would alter your officer recommendation, it wouldn't be the case. I can confirm that we would maintain the position that we've put forward within the report, that there are no contracts in place. But in terms of the issues that you consider, that is material.
Thank you for that. So I'll now invite comments and questions from members to the officers in turn, starting with Councillor Carey.
Thank you, Chair. When this last came before us in June, I was one of those that was in favour of the application, but we realised that the officers had been caught on the hop, and that if we had approved it then, they hadn't had the opportunity to put appropriate conditions in place, and that was a major factor in us deferring the application. As things stand now, I think the latest report we've had is, quite frankly, I think it's unduly pessimistic in its appraisal, and I'm still of the view that this application should be approved, even more so given the added information that we've had from Riding for the Disabled. I think this will be a beneficial facility for the whole of the horse riding community. It's a very popular pastime. It's got to go somewhere where there are fields and green spaces. So I don't personally see a conflict in placing it here. So really, I'm later on quite happy to support any move to approve this application with the conditions set out in Appendix 1. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty, have you any comments or questions for officers?
I have no questions. I would support my colleague Councillor Carey, his view in this matter. I think with the conditions as set out in the appendix, there's no reason why this shouldn't go ahead.
Thank you.
Councillor Friend.
Yes, I would echo both the last statements from my two colleagues. I also remember that it was the covering over the menage, and that we would lose an outdoor menage in the last application, whereas this one, they're going to build a new outdoor menage, so we don't actually lose it. So I think they have improved the whole offer, and I'm mindful to approve it as well. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, I'll come back to Councillor McCarthy later, hoping that IT have managed to sort out the problem. So, Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chair. I'm very much in approval of this. I think it's a very good application, much needed. I do agree with my colleagues on what they were saying. As Councillor Friend said, it is an improved application with the alterations to the menage, and I'm very much in sympathy with the disability section of it. We do need to be leaning towards disabled facilities. We are a disabled friendly council, and for us to rule something out like this out of hand would be totally wrong. So I'm very much in approval of this, with the conditions laid down in Appendix 1.
Councillor Mundry.
Yes, I agree with the other councillors as well. I agree with them all, and I think approval.
Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Morgan, you were just saying something and I cut you off.
No, I just added with the inclusion of the Appendix 1.
Thank you.
Recommendations, yeah.
Councillor Parish.
Sorry, Chair, I finally got in through Teams, so hello. Yeah, I'm sympathetic with the officers because I think they're following planning law, and it's not always obvious and it doesn't always seem right. But from what others have said, I think we were told we would need reasons if we're going to go against the recommendation. So I've got some reasons, but I'll happy to hear what other people think before we get to that.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler, have you got any comments or questions?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I've got 2 questions. The first one relates to the external lighting that is proposed. Now, lighting does cause significant harm to the green belt. And if anybody's been up to the Barley Castle Lane trading estate, sort of on the edge of the green belt there, the lighting from those units causes significant harm. So could we have some more details, please, of the external lighting in terms of where hours of operation and how far the spillage will be? Thank you.
Nikki?
So, Councillor Wheeler, as part of the application, there's no lighting proposed. We've got condition 9 in Appendix 1, which says no external lighting whatsoever shall be installed or erected without the prior express consent of the local planning authority, which means if they wanted to come back further and put any flood lighting up, for example, they would need consent to do so. There might be some minor lighting that they could put around the site, which would be de minimis and wouldn't require planning consent. But for flood lighting, for example, it would require consent.
So, sorry, so did I misread this then? Is the associated external lighting relating to the car parking?
So it's within the boundary of the site, yeah. Yeah, and the build structures. Yeah.
Right. But again, that can cause significant harm, car park lighting.
We can add another condition in there, and if you were minded to approve the application, you can either delegate that to me or I can work it through with Chair, which talks about the luminance of that lighting and the extent of that display to make sure that we protect residential amenity. The buildings themselves are 40 metres from the properties. It's certainly viable that the lighting could be erected on there without harming a residential amenity.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that answer your question, Judith, or do you have?
Yes, that's fine. I misread the associated external lighting. My second question is that if we are minded to grant approval tonight, and for whatever reason the riding school folds or they want to change direction, what happens to the permission we have granted? And particularly the building that is the one that is causing the harm. What becomes of that on the site?
So the permission runs with the land. So in effect, if this riding school was cease to operate, a riding school facility, the use of that land, the use of the building is still in situ. So somebody else could come over and take over that facility if they deemed they wanted to do that. If an alternative proposal was to come forward on that site that required planning permission, an application would be considered in accordance with the usual requirements.
So, sorry, just to clarify then, so what if we granted permission, that building could only be used for a riding school? So it's an indoor riding facility, so that's what we're granting permission for. That was its use. So you couldn't use it for storing heavy machinery or something? No. It's not. You could. There would be no change of use under permitted developments for storage. So it's got a specific use as a riding menage. Yeah, I mean we could. Yeah. We if you wanted to tie that down more specifically, so it doesn't come within, I think probably within a use class D1 potentially, or as it was D1, we could put condition on that says it can only be used for that. So it couldn't be used within any other any uses within a similar use class. We could do that. Okay. I'm not. So I'm just wondering what are the uses that I've had off the top of my head in D1. I wouldn't know what they are. Okay, if you can just come back to me on that, I want just a couple of minutes. Yeah. Okay, that's fine. I mean, I don't. Yeah. I mean, we could
come back to that later. So
okay. So
sorry, Chair. Can I just comment on that?
Oh yes, by all means, Paul.
Yeah. So I mean, obviously, I would need Ms. Gallagher to comment on this point. I think, but I mean, clearly, once the development is in situ, the damage to the green belt is already there, isn't it? So a change of use, an application for a change of use from this to another type of use would be your consideration of that would be different. Obviously, it would be a consideration of that change given the existing structures which are which would then be on the site. So it wouldn't be the case necessarily that you would be refusing this for a similar reason, refusing that application for a similar reason, because of course the building would already be in situ and openness would already have been affected to that degree.
Okay, thank you.
So it is more likely that future application would be successful.
Yep.
Thank you.
So I can actually come back on that point now, Councillor Wheeler.
Yes, all right.
If you'd like me to. So it's actually within use class D2. Apologies for that, not D1. So assembly and leisure. So you might want to, if you were thinking minded to approve this, you might want to restrict it to the specific use.
Okay.
Thank you.
Any comments or
Nikki? Sorry, does Nikki want to comment on?
Sorry, Paul, if you want to make a comment, please come in. I was
just wondering if Ms. Gallagher wanted to comment on the point I was making about a future change of use once this development has been implemented. The considerations would be different because the openness would already have been affected.
Yes, that's absolutely right. So what we're looking at there, I think, is slightly different perhaps to the question that Councillor Wheeler put to us, is what would happen not to this building, but to the future use of the site if an alternative application was submitted for something other than this on this site. Now, we were granting planning permission on this for this site. What in effect would happen is that this would become, the extent of this would be previously developed land. The area of the menage and car parking at the moment already is. But that would be the area of previously developed land would be extended to include the new menage area as well, and we'd also be looking at a different measure in terms of openness, because this would obviously, in the officer's opinion, result in harm to openness, and therefore that your benchmark for that measure is increased as a result of this development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I come to Councillor Wright now? Have you any comments or questions?
Not at this moment.
Okay. Councillor Barr.
I have some sympathy with the comments from Councillor Parish. I am very happy when our officers are defending the green belt and are doing so on very strong legal grounds that they are here. So I really need a lot of convincing that the very special circumstances exist. I am aware, however, that I've been on the other side of the fence when it came to Lyng Rugby Club, where we had very special circumstances because of community benefit, and that was potentially a more intrusive set of developments that we allowed. So I've got three issues. The first one is how much weight can we give to the riding for the disabled, because we've had some very persuasive correspondence on this. It involves a small number of disabled people, but I think, as Councillor Morgan said, we are a disabled friendly council, and I am satisfied that evidence has been provided that cannot be easily substituted. The second issue, I'm not quite sure how much weight to give to, is on page 18 of our report. We've always been warned by the directors that we should not take the scream of the crowd into account if you have large numbers of members of the public screaming either for or against an application. However, I am somewhat moved that out of 54 neighbour notification letters, 52 letters of support were produced. So I'd like to know what proportion of those letters of support were from neighbours, because if the vast majority of the neighbours don't mind this going in, and they're the ones that are going to be affected, then I think that might alter the committee's view of the impact on the openness. And the third one is a query concerning Paul Clisby's very helpful advice, which is that if we were to put in a condition that says you can't have a change, that this must only be used for a menage, all that would achieve would be that a planning application would have to be put in for a change of use. The building already exists, therefore we're unlikely to be able to oppose a change of use, which would say that that condition was pointless. In other circumstances, we say that a facility needs to be taken down if the existing use ceases. Would that be excessively draconian in this case, in order to overcome Paul Clisby's concern? Because if they stop using it as a menage, they'd have to restore the openness of the greenbelt by taking the building down. I'm not at all convinced that that's a practical solution, but nevertheless, I'd like to hear some advice on that argument, because that's what we do elsewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Right. Can we take your questions in order? Could you just briefly repeat the first one, and then we can ask for an answer, Bob?
Well, the first one is of the 52 letters of support, how many came from neighbours and were responses to the 54 neighbour notifications? So what was the balance of responses from neighbours?
Councillor Borough, I've got that as your second point, but we'll come to that one first. Sorry. No, it's okay. I think the first point was about the weight that we can give to the to riding for the disabled.
That's right, yes. Yeah,
so in terms of how much in terms of how much weight we can give to riding for the disabled, I think we're talking here. We've heard yourself say, we've heard the other council talk about being a pro-equalities council, and I think that's really important, and I think that is a subject that is referred to within the report within section 8. We do have a specific section within the report on the Equalities Act and how we consider decisions in those terms. Now, what this does, and those provisions within the Equality Act refer to all businesses, so would refer to the riding school as well as the council, although it be non-specific for the riding school. But what they're suggesting here is that they are taking this a step further than what would be required under the Equalities Act, that they are providing specific facilities that would be suitable for RDA riders. Now they do have, I think, 21 riders with disabilities on site at the moment. Now obviously disabilities come varieties of spectrum, and I think what they're looking at is introducing for the RDA is a mountain ramp, which they might not have at the moment and might not be required for the clients that they have at the moment. So that is material to the decision. I think what you'd need to consider is the extent of weight that you would need to give to that being very special. So why is that required for this site in this location? What makes it, what gives that very special circumstances?
Thank you.
Is that okay for that part of the?
Yeah, thank you. No, that's fine for the RDA one. Yes. And then second one was the number of.
Yeah. So the next query then was the number of representations that we've received from surrounding properties. I think the number of representations have been relatively small. I can't provide figures up with that at the moment, but I think it's relatively small from those directly from the neighbours. But I think there have been some, but small in the context.
Right. And you don't know the balance of those in support and those against?
From who are local?
From neighbours?
No, and to an extent, I would need to advise that isn't material as such.
Not material. Okay,
so it might be of interest, but it isn't material.
Yeah.
What I would advise you talked there about the scream of the crowd, and this impact on openness. So therefore, if the local residents, if they aren't concerned about the impact on openness, then that might have an influence over whether councillors should be concerned. And I just think it's important just to recognise the point when we talk about visual impact or impact in terms of a visual impact on Greenbelt. That is different from when we talk about the impact on the character. So, for example, its proximity, its impact on the street scene is different from how we perceive openness. And openness is very much the impact on openness is very much a matter of principle associated with this development. But I'll just leave that with you. The third query that you raised there was if the use was to cease, could we put a condition on that? I think it was the building that essentially would need to be removed. The structures associated with that would need to be removed. And I would agree with you there, Councillor Barther. I don't think that's a very pragmatic solution, and I don't think it would meet the tests. I don't think it would be reasonable. It's a large building, a substantial construction. This isn't a temporary consent, and I don't think it would necessarily realise the benefits that you're after either. If we were only doing that on the cease of operation of that business, but that business didn't cease before a revised planning application for an alternative use was sought, then we would still be in the position we described earlier, where the bar for the assessment of openness is greater than it currently is.
That's very helpful and has helped me make my decision. Thank you, Nikki.
Thank you, Councillor Barn. Thank you, officers, for those useful answers. Councillor McCarthy, how are you getting on?
Can you hear me, Chair?
Yes, I can hear you.
Thank you, Chair. And first of all, can I apologise profoundly to everybody, but it's back on sync now, so thank you. It was just a disaster when we started the meeting, but now I can hear everybody, so I've been able to take cognizance of what everybody's said, so thank you, Chair. Yes, when I read this document, Chair, I was struggling to see why this application was going to be refused. There were some salient points there, but if this had just been a virgin piece of land, maybe that would have swayed me slightly in the opposite direction, but we've already got a riding school there. This, I think, would enhance that, certainly provide wonderful facility for people disabled, although some might argue, say that losing of the riding school in Winwick isn't a planning issue at this point in time, but nevertheless we did lose a large riding school in Winwick not too long ago. This will provide wonderful facilities, so on that basis I couldn't support the recommendation. Going back to the structure itself, councillors may recall when we've discussed other buildings on Green Line, for example stables, and what would happen if when they're not in use. If you look at this, both the indoor and outdoor menage could quite easily be restored back to green belt, as could the buildings. If you look at the materials, what they use, we've had some that's been a wooden structure with cladding on, metal structure with some maybe galvanised steel cladding on that can be easily removed, and it could be returned back to green belt. So these are not massive structures that you're stuck with for the rest of your life. They could be returned back to green field. So overall, having read the documentation within the planning applications and the other documentation that's come, the residents and certainly from the updates, I would support the application. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. If we go round again and see if anyone has any further comments. Councillor Carey, have you anything to add to the discussion we've had?
Nothing further, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty?
Nothing further, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Friend?
Nothing further, thank you, Chair.
Councillor Morgan?
Only a comment referring back to Councillor Barr's points on the representations from local neighbours in support and the percentage of what was from local neighbours. On the other hand, I don't see any letters of objection from local neighbours, so I carry on in support.
Thank you. Councillor Mundry?
Nothing further, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Parish?
Chair, yes, I did say the officers had hinted they want reasons for going against their recommendation. So I've got two ways round the MPPF to suggest, or rather to fit in with the MPPF. The very special circumstances one says you can't have very special circumstances unless the potential harm to the green belt is clearly outweighed by other considerations. And it sounds like the committee's sort of suggesting the potential harm to the green belt is less than substantial and is outweighed by the commercial and the community considerations, which includes the provision of riding facilities for people with a protected characteristic, in the technical term, in other words, disability. But even without that, it sounds like we might well be minded to think that the structure is so, I'm not saying minimal, but it's small enough that the openness isn't really that much affected. And that's obviously a key consideration. Openness, did find a lovely little bit from a court case this year. The word openness is open textured, and a number of factors are capable of being relevant when it comes to applying it to the particular facts of a specific case. I want especially Mr. Clisby, and so I'm inclined to think not on either of those or both we would be within the NPPF. I think the problem is, and the members gradually realise this, and Councillor McCarthy's just said it could always be taken down. It's a permanent change to the green belt, because once it's there, it's very hard to resist anything else on the site. But with that caveat, I propose, if we need to put forward reasons, those would be my reasons.
Right, thank you for those. Actually, considerably better worded than what I had in mind. But can I ask Nikki's advice and possibly Paul's? Did you say something to me about it being better to have one really substantial reason rather than to tag another one onto it, which might be more arguable? Nikki, can you remind me of what that advice was? Nikki, are you with me?
Yep, sorry, just muted there. So that goes for the case whether it's an approval or refusal. Really, is there? It's it's best to have confidence in one reason than to try to spread an argument over multiple. In the examples that Councillor Parish has just cited there in terms of openness, we just need to have a look at well, first of all, I think we need to look at the provisions of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act. First of all, we need to look towards the core strategy, which in our case refers to the NPPF, which brings us back around then to those two factors in paragraph 9.2 of the report. So there's two ways you could look at that if you wanted to look at openness. So the first is whether you consider it's an appropriate facilities for outdoor sport and recreation, and that the facility preserves the openness of the green belt and doesn't conflict with the purpose of including land within it. So that's one area that you could have a look at. You could consider that it accords with that, or you could consider that it's limited infilling of previously developed land. Now I've confirmed through the report and I've confirmed earlier that the majority of this land, save for the menage, is previously developed land, because the menage and stables etc. were constructed on that previously. So it is previously developed land in the main. The menage itself would be on I think what somebody referred to as virgin land earlier. It's not previously developed land. However, the impact and openness of that is nothing, essentially. It just isn't there. So then in both of those instances, it would need to be demonstrated that it would have no greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. Now, just to recap on the points there, how we look at openness, so we're looking at those in spatial terms, so height, floor area, general massing, and we're also looking at that in terms of its visual. So how does it connect through spaces, which we do consider there's some harm, but it's minimal. So that the main issue there is its spatial openness. And I suppose the principles associated with green belt and openness would be similar for other applications as well. So that's not an argument that's restricted just to a riding school. So if you were to have a similar application that came in for different use within the green belt, we would need to have a look at those, how you've applied those principles, and how that might relate to those other applications. The alternative, I think, that I've heard, the argument that I've heard come through from councillors, is the weight that you're looking to potentially give to disabled riders, and whether you consider that as very special circumstances. So that's another option. I think that from the conversations that you have, from the debate that you're having tonight, that I can see that you might want to pull in to discuss further as a reason why you consider you want to approve this application, if that is the case.
Thank you, Nikki. I think we're
you want me to comment?
Yeah? Sorry,
Chair,
Steve.
do you want me to comment?
Oh, Paul, yes, of course. Beg your pardon.
Yeah. Sorry, and I mean, once again, because to some degree these are matters of planning discretion, as it were. I sort of bow to Nikki if I'm not quite right in what I'm saying. It does seem to me that as a matter of fact, and therefore potentially a matter of law, that, and in fact from the debate that I heard, it was my understanding that it was generally accepted that I mean, I think first of all the exemptions for appropriate types of development, that some types of development are appropriate, it did seem to me that as a matter of fact this application just didn't fall into those, and in terms of its effect on the openness, it seemed to me that members accepted that this caused harm to openness, and that if the application was for something else, that it wouldn't get permission, and therefore that it wasn't the view of members that that this didn't harm openness. My understanding from the debate is that insofar as members do want to approve this, they accept that there is harm to openness, but they are saying that that is outweighed by the very special circumstances that are put forward. I think they're mentioned in paragraph 9.69 and 9.17, aren't they?
Thank you.
The appellant and the officer have something, and economic benefit and employment. I think the three advantages, benefits that are put forward, and that those amount to very special circumstances. So I think from my perspective, if that is the line which members are going to go with, I would be more comfortable with that argument than with the other arguments, because it is quite a large building, isn't it, in the green belt on the edge of a built-up area, and it does seem factually that harms openness. I'm not sure to what extent that's a legal point. It may be a sort of planning, more of a planner's submission.
Parish again.
Yes, Steve.
I mean, I don't want to prolong this, but I mean, when you're trying to get your teeth into the National Planning Policy Framework, some of it does seem a bit, should we say, circular, because 145 is the circumstances in which you might consider allowing new building in the green belt, and it says, and in this case, if you regard the developments as the provision of appropriate facilities in connection with the existing use of land for outdoor sport or outdoor recreation. So that's a circumstance in which you can allow new building, but then it says, as long as the facilities preserve the openness of the green belt, they do not conflict with the purposes of including land within it. So it says these are the circumstances in which you can put new buildings up.
It's a tricky document.
But then if you say, well, putting new buildings up means you lose openness, it's just gone round in a circle. But yes, I didn't draft this.
And of course, the
other party did.
Points about previously developed land, which brought out very strongly in the next item as well. Right.
Chair, can I suggest?
Councillor Wheeler, do you want to make any additional comments or questions?
Thank you, Chair. Was that Paul wanting to mention something then before I say something?
No, it was Steve Parish again.
Right,
I mean,
okay.
last time we did this, we left it to officers and the chair to knock wording together to suit us, which it's not quite the horrible thing of saying we're going to decide this and then find the reasons afterwards. I think we know the reasons. It's just the way they're drafted, which we need to sort out.
Thank you. Councillor Wheeler.
No, Chair. Nothing further except that if Nikki could look at the exterior lighting for the car parking, just to make sure that's fairly watertight as to hours of type of lighting, spillage, and sort of hours of operation.
Okay, have you got a note of that, Nikki?
I have, Councillor Graham. Yes, thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Councillor Wright, do you want to add anything now?
No, thank you.
Okay. Councillor Barr, anything further?
Only one issue. One of the reasons I'm finding it difficult to assess the impact on the openness of the green belt is that we're only being given photographs of the site as it is and two-dimensional plans. We're not being given a plan and profile. Is there a plan of the profile of the building or an illustration of the building somewhere outside our papers we've not seen?
So sorry, Councillor Grime, would you like me to respond? So the at the elevations of the building were provided in an update note to members last Friday.
Right, okay. I'll take a look at those now.
So in effect, it's a standard construction pitch roof, maximum
Right.
5 metres, shallow pitch.
Yeah.
And 5
No,
metres.
I saw today's
small
update.
for
I didn't see the
pitch roof
Friday
building.
update. I'll take a look at it now.
Thank you. Councillor McCarthy, have you any further comments?
Perhaps just to briefly touch on what Bob said, because one of the difficulties I think we've all suffered, and unfortunately I was not able to attend all the meeting, but since the lockdown in March, what's massively missed in my view is the fact that we can no longer go on site visits. They're so beneficial, and when you have situations like this, to stand and have a look what's there, what might be there in any application, to me helps so much in making the right decision. And the fact we've not got that facility, I find that sad at the moment. And that's all my comments would be. The lack of, I've always supported site visits. It gives a far better insight to the decisions you have to make. And just looking at a few, not the very best photographs in a document and a few sketches, unfortunately, doesn't always help. That's the only comment I want to make, Chair.
Right.
Thank you.
Councillor, do you want me to just come back on that?
Yes, by all means.
Just Councillor McCarthy, just we're always here to provide assistance. So in the past, we've referred members to Google Maps as a useful tool, but if in the event there are obviously situations where that doesn't help at all, and sometimes we come across sites where there are there's no access, for example, where Google Maps cannot access, so you cannot see from the roadside in those instances. And where that is the case, if there's any additional photos that you require, we will endeavour to provide those for you before planning committee, to just get in contact with us. Yep. And we'll see if we can assist. Thanks.
I think in fairness, Nikki, over my 13 years on this planning committee, there's been very, very few incidences where we've not been able to access a site, have a good look at where a particular building or whatever is going to be developed or taken down, and been able to make, hopefully then, a proper informed decision. So not having access, believe me, have been very, very few and far between.
Thank you.
Chair,
yes.
I've just taken a look at the elevations, and my concern is that the elevations give us some idea of the design, but I'm perhaps my brain's getting old. I cannot convert that into a vision of what the building would look like in situ and the impact that it's going to have on the Greenbelt. I would hope that in these circumstances, particularly if you have a controversial application of this sort, that applicants could be strongly encouraged to give either a photo montage or a proper three-dimensional view that would allow us to make that judgment, because I think a straight architectural elevation simply not, and a vertical plan is simply not enough to do that.
Yes, and it's useful to have a few trees and some people on as well to give you an actual idea of the scale. Could you make a note of that, Nikki? Because I think it does matter to members.
Yes, I have made a note of that. I'll take it back. Thank you, councillors.
Okay. Do any members of the committee wish to make any further comments? Shout up.
Yes, Chair.
Yes.
I'd just like to echo Councillor McCarthy's comments. I really do miss the site visits. I'm a big fan of site visits, and nothing beats actually standing there and looking at the site. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's hope we can get back to them when they've vaccinated us all as soon as possible. Do officers want to make any further points of clarification?
The only thing I'd like to mention, Councillor Grime, is about process moving forward. I think Councillor Parish there referenced that maybe if the recommendation was going to make contrary to officers' recommendation, that we could take this away and come up with a specific reason for that. But I think, as per the request in the presentation, we do need a paper audit for why this decision has been made. So
yes,
we would
need to work on.
Yeah, thank you. It doesn't. There's no requirement.
We need to give a reason.
So there's no requirement to put a reason in the decision notice, unlike a reason for refusal. So it is just something to be included within the minutes from tonight. Yeah. Thanks.
Okay. Well, I think I'm ready for a motion, and I will propose the motion that the application is approved, subject to conditions, including the extra condition about lighting.
You've gone dead, Joan.
You're frozen, Chair.
The Greenbelt is outweighed by community considerations,
Excuse me,
especially.
Excuse me. You just froze early on in that sentence, so I was wondering if you could start. Yeah, sorry, if you could start that again, that'd be great. Thank you.
Okay, I'll start again from the beginning. I propose the motion that the application is approved, subject to conditions, including the new conditions mentioned about the lighting in the car park and the single use. And the reason is the very special circumstances that the potential harm to the green belt is outweighed by community considerations, especially to disabled riders. And I would add that the arrangements made with the disabled riders group seem solid enough without there actually being a contract or controls, which are not possible. Is anyone prepared to second that motion? Councillor Carey?
Councillor Morgan.
Councillor Morgan, thank you. Does anyone wish to make an amendment, possibly to the reasons? Nikki?
Thank you. I've just got a query before we progress, Councillor, just to make sure I record this correctly. You motion to approve subject to conditions regarding lighting. That's that put forward by Councillor Wheeler, and then you also mentioned about single use. I was just looking for clarity over that before we move forward.
Yeah.
So what?
Then I gave the reason. Do you want me to reiterate that?
So no. So it was just the condition regarding lighting, okay. And then you mentioned single use.
Yes, that we don't just say anything in D2, that we give the use as a riding facility.
Yes, I'll record that. Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, that clarifies that. So people have had a minute to think. Does anyone want to make any amendment, particular to the reasons? Steve, did you want to add anything further, as you said, or will you go just with the?
No, I'd have gone with an and/or with the provision of appropriate facilities for outdoor sport or outdoor recreation. But like I say, that's part of a circular argument in the MPPF. So I think the main one is, you're right, it's there is harm from the proposal, but it's outweighed by the benefits.
Thank you. Right, any further amendments? Oh, sorry, any other thoughts about amendments before we carry on? Okay, so the motion is proposed and seconded. Can I hand that over to Democratic Services to take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
Abstain.
Thank you. Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Flaherty?
For.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Graham?
For.
Councillor McCarthy?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Parish?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
Abstain.
And Councillor Wright?
For.
Okay, thank you. The application is approved.
Thank you. We go on to item 2, application number 2020-36311, Newhouse Farm, Hatton Lane, Warrington, WA4 4BZ. This is full planning major, proposed demolition of existing equestrian buildings and the construction of 31 dwellings, including affordable housing provision, associated parking, landscaping, associated infrastructure and community open space or orchard. The recommendation is to approve, subject to conditions and an S106 planning obligation. Can I invite the planning officer, Matt Carney, to give a report?
Thanks, Chair. So item 2 at Newhouse Farm. Members should be aware of the update report that was circulated last Friday, and then the additional update report that was circulated earlier today, which provides members with further details on representations received following the publication of the agenda from Councillors Axel and Harris, Hatton Parish Council, Streatham Parish Council, and some additional representations from local residents. It also details some amendments to a number of the conditions listed within the officer's report. The application site is circa 1.6 hectares in size and in use as an equestrian business. The site consists of a number of existing buildings that would all be demolished as part of the proposal. The site is situated to the south of Hatton and is designated as being located within the green belt in the local plan core strategy. The application proposes the demolition of the existing equestrian buildings and the construction of 31 dwellings comprising 6 detached, 16 semi-detached and 9 terraced houses ranging from 1 to 5 bedrooms in size. 30% of the total number of properties would be secured as affordable housing via a Section 106 agreement, and this would therefore result in the provision of 9 dwellings, 5 as properties available for shared ownership, 4 available for affordable rent. The proposal also involves the provision of an area of community open space to the north of the proposed development. The application is before members as a result of an objection from Hatton Parish Council. The application was publicised by 16 neighbour notification letters, a site notice and a press notice, and 7 representations were received as a result of the original consultation on the application. As I mentioned before, some additional representations have been received since the agenda has been published, and they're referenced in the update report. The objections raised are detailed within section 4 of the report, and in brief include matters of principle in relation to the green belt and sustainability, impacts upon community infrastructure, design of the properties and the impact upon the character of the area, impact upon residential amenity, traffic impacts and flood risk. As members are aware, all plan applications should be determined in accordance with local development plan policies unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The local plan policies against which these applications should be assessed are contained within section 7 of your report. I'm now intending to go through the report and summarise the key issues for you. The primary key issues associated with the development are principle, and in particular in terms of the site's location in the green belt, the provision of new homes, and in particular the relevance of affordable housing, the site's rural location and highway matters, design and layout, impact on residential amenity, impact on heritage assets, flood risk and ecology. Turning first to the principle of the development. The site is designated as being located in the green belt within local plan core strategy, and as such national and local planning policies relating to development in the green belt apply. The NPPF sets out that the construction of new buildings should be regarded as inappropriate, subject to a number of exceptions. One such exception is the partial or complete redevelopment of previously developed land, which would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development, or not cause substantial harm to the openness of the green belt, where the development would reuse previously developed land and contribute to meeting an identified affordable housing need within the area of the local planning authority. Important to set them out in full because they raise a number of matters that are important to members' consideration that I intend to drill down to in a bit more detail now. And effectively are crucial factors in assessing the acceptability of the development. Firstly, if the application site constitutes previously developed land. And as set out in the officer's report, it is considered the land and the buildings at Newhouse Farm are in use for purposes associated with an equestrian business, and therefore the site does constitute previously developed land in accordance with the definition in the NPPF. The second important consideration is if the development contributes to meeting an identified affordable housing need. As I have set out, the scheme proposes a policy compliant provision of 9 split between shared ownership and affordable rent properties. As members are aware from consideration of previous applications and from the information contained within the officer's report, there has been a significant under-delivery of affordable housing in the borough over recent years. With the council's latest housing needs assessment identifying the need of 377 affordable dwellings per annum, with a delivery of only 112 within the same period. On this basis, it's considered the development would contribute to meeting an identified affordable housing need in the borough. The significance of meeting an identified affordable housing need is an important distinction in applying the national planning policy to the proposed development. On the basis of affordable housing being provided and meeting an identified need, It's necessary to assess if the development would not cause substantial harm to the green belt, rather than assessing if the development would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing development. And it's important to be clear that this is a lesser test when assessing harm to the green belt. Turning to assessing the development's impact upon openness, as set out in the officer's report, it's accepted that the proposed development would result in a 19% reduction in volume of buildings on the site from existing to proposed, and a 29% reduction in the building footprint compared to the existing buildings on the application site. It's therefore considered the majority of the proposed houses would not have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt, as they generally occupy the space that should be left following the demolition of the substantial existing buildings on site. The exception to this is the area of hard standing to the southeastern edge of the site, where 6 dwellings will be built. It is recognised that this would have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt. However, it's considered that this group of houses would this group of houses would tend to only be seen against the backdrop of the remaining development, and it should be seen in the context of the overall reduction of floor space and volume in the site, and it's further mitigated to some extent by the existing bunds to the south and the west and new screen planting that would restrict the views of the site from public vantage points to the north. Overall, it's considered that this would not result in substantial harm to the green belt, to the openness of the green belt. All 31 houses proposed have a maximum ridge height of 8 metres and are higher than some of the single story existing buildings. However, none of the houses are taller than the tallest of the existing buildings on site. It's recognised that the greater uniformity of the height which the new houses would introduce would have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt. However, this impact is balanced by the removal of the existing taller buildings on site, and therefore, whilst it's considered it would have a greater impact, the impact would not amount to substantial harm to the green belt. The development results in changes to the existing bunding and introduces some areas of new bunding and acoustic fencing to protect against motorway noise. Whilst there would be a reduction in the total length of bunding around the application site, a 3-metre high acoustic fence would be introduced. This would result in a greater impact on openness than the existing situation. However, the harm to the green belt is mitigated by the overall reduction in the length of the bunding, and the bunding and fencing being seen in the context of the wider proposed development and through the proposed landscaping. Again, it's not considered that this part of the proposal amounts to substantial harm to the openness of the green belt. Therefore, to conclude, it's considered that whilst the development would have a greater impact on the openness of the green belt than the existing developments, for the reasons that I've set out, which are covered in further detail in the officer's report, the development does not cause substantial harm to the openness of the green belt and is therefore an appropriate development in the green belt in accordance with paragraph 145G of the NPPF. Turning to the site's rural location and highway matters, it's recognised that the site is located in a rural area. However, it's not considered to be an isolated location, given there is access to some local services and a bus service to Warrington via Stretton and Stockton Heath. There is already a continuous footway along Hatton Lane from the site to the nearest bus stop on Sankey Lane. Condition 21 would require additional street lighting to serve this route. Whilst it's acknowledged that future residents would be likely to make the most journeys to and from their homes by private car, there are other transport modes, including buses, cycling and walking, that ensures that for a rural part of the borough, the site is in a reasonably accessible location. The application is being considered by colleagues within the transportation section who consider the use of the existing access for the proposed development as acceptable, and sufficient space is provided within the application site to allow for the appropriate servicing of the proposed dwellings. The levels of car parking meet with the council's parking standards for the new developments SPD, and electric charge points will be facilitated. On this basis, it's considered there will be no significant detrimental impact on highway safety as a result of the proposed development. Excuse me. Turning to design and layout. To achieve compliance with local planning policy, it's necessary for the proposal to ensure that the siting and design of the development relates satisfactorily to its rural setting in terms of its scale, layout, use of materials, and respects local landscape character in terms of both immediate impact and distant views. The applicant has sought to design the proposals.
Matt, we lost you for the last 2 sentences, I think. Can you repeat those? The connection went wrong.
Yeah, no problem. Shall I start again at the section about design and layout, and hopefully that'll be okay. Okay, so turning to design and layout, to achieve compliance with local planning policy, it's necessary for the proposal to ensure that the siting and design of the development relates satisfactorily to its rural setting in terms of its scale, layout and use of materials, and respects local landscape character in terms of both immediate impact and distant views. The applicant has sought to design the proposal as a cluster of developments on a former farmstead with similarities to other similar sites in the wider area. This approach helps to ensure that the proposal is in keeping with the existing pattern of development in the landscape, and therefore would not harmfully conflict with the character and appearance of the wider area. The palette of materials proposed for the dwellings is reflective of those found in local architectural styles, and this is reflected in the design of proposed houses, which includes features such as stone heads and sills and areas of banded brickwork as a nod to surrounding development. The proposal seeks to provide a number of areas of new landscaping, in particular areas of woodland planting to the southern and western boundaries, alongside general planting within the development. Sorry.
Lost him.
Yeah, it's okay. I'd lost myself. 1 second. Sorry. I was about to lose connection to the internet, so it was more important to put that back on. This new woodland planting has benefits in screening the site and helps to mitigate the impact of proposed acoustic fencing that is necessary to address the noise amenity concerns. The application also proposes an area of open space to the north of the proposed dwellings that would provide an area of open space for residents and allow access into Hatton Village. Turning to residential amenity, in terms of residential amenity, particular consideration is being given to the relationship of proposed dwellings, and particularly the relationship of the dwelling proposed on plot 2 to the adjoining bungalow on Hatton Lane. The relationship would result in a separation distance between the rear elevation of the bungalow and the blank gable of the dwelling on plot 2 of 13 metres. This is below our recommended interface distance of 16 metres for this type of relationship. However, given the existing relationship the bungalow has of a large farm building at a distance of 10 metres, it's considered to result in an improvement and therefore be an acceptable relationship. The relationship between the proposed dwellings and the retained farmhouse extends and exceeds our recommended standards, and the next nearest dwelling is circa 120 metres away from the site. The proposed dwellings have been designed to provide a high quality living environment with particular importance placed on ensuring through the use of fencing, acoustic fencing, impacts on amenity associated by noise is within acceptable limits. Turning to impacts on heritage assets, the site does not contain any listed or locally listed buildings, although it's recognised that a number of the existing buildings on the application site are of some interest given their age. The council's conservation officer is satisfied with the loss of the existing buildings on the application site, given their significance having already been affected by the previous extensions and alterations to them. The next nearest heritage assets are the locally listed buildings at Bob's Old Cottage and Newton's Cottage. These both are circa 85 metres to the site north on Hatton Lane, and it's considered the proposed development would not result in any harm to their significance. Flood risk, the site is all in flood zone 1 and has only very localised surface water flood risk, and conditions are proposed to ensure that the detailed surface water drainage scheme addresses this limited risk. In terms of ecology, the site is situated within a number of special scientific interest impact zones. However, the proposed development at this site is not in any of the impact risk zone categories, and therefore development would not have any impact on the SSI. Ecology surveys have been submitted by the applicant, and these have been assessed by Greater Manchester Ecology Unit. A bat survey identified one roost in one of the buildings to be demolished, and the potential for bat roost in 2 of the buildings. As members will be aware, the presence of protected species alone should not prevent development. However, acceptable mitigation measures are necessary to ensure that the impact of development is appropriately addressed. In this case, a licence will be required from Natural England, and Greater Manchester Ecology Unit have suggested a condition to require appropriate bat boxes to be delivered as part of the proposal. and no other protected species were found to be present in any building, and the council's ecology officers, council's ecology advisors considered the development to be acceptable subject to conditions. For these reasons that I just set out and the reasons that are given in much more detail in the officer's report, the application complies with national and local planning policy and is therefore recommended for approval subject to the completion of a section 106 to secure the affordable housing in perpetuity.
Thank you, Matt. I can confirm that we've received additional written representations. That's in addition to the ones that Matt has already mentioned, from Councillor Sharon Harris, which is an objection, from Groves Town Planning, also an objection, and from Emery Planning in support. I will now ask members of the committee to confirm that they have read and understood these representations. Councillor Barr.
Confirm.
Councillor Carey.
Confirm.
Councillor Flaherty.
Confirm.
Councillor Friend.
Confirm.
Councillor McCarthy.
Yes, I confirm.
Councillor Morgan.
Confirm.
Councillor Mundry.
Confirm.
Councillor Parish.
I confirm.
Councillor Wheeler. Councillor Wheeler
has declared interest.
Thank you. Councillor Wright. Councillor Wright. I'll come back to Councillor Wright. I've also read and understood the representations, and I confirm they will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Councillor Wright, are you back with us? We seem to have lost Councillor Wright. I've also received an update which came round this afternoon, which had more details of the houses and also brought up points about the distance and safe walking route to the schools, or the lack of a safe walking route. I'll now invite comments and questions from members to officers in turn.
Can you hear me now, Councillor Wright?
Have we got Councillor Wright here?
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now.
Confirmed, Chair.
Have you read the representations?
Yes, I've got a special speaker and it just turned itself off. Yeah, I confirm.
All right. Have you read the representations? I
confirm I've read the representations.
Thank you. That's great. So we can carry on. Okay. So can I start with Councillor Friend? Have you got any comments or questions to officers?
Yes, thank you, Chair. I think 6 semi-detached, 16 6 detached, 16 semi-detached and 9 terrace housing and 30% affordable housing is absolutely excellent and very refreshing. We keep seeing big estates of detached houses and developers saying they can't afford to make a profit if they provide the affordable housing. It's really refreshing to see that really good mix of housing and the full affordable housing. Thank you, Chair.
That's great, thank you. Councillor Morgan.
I agree with Councillor Friend. It's very refreshing to see those figures, especially on the affordable. Thank you.
Right, Councillor McCarthy.
I reserve the right to come back later, please, Chair.
Councillor Mundry.
No comments or questions, Chair.
Okay, Councillor Parish.
Mr. Chair, I've got 2 particular points. One is that, again, it seems to be applying the framework because it's classed as previously developed land, but how we got it to be equestrian land is a bit obscure, for which we've had to have this affidavit sworn, and it just seems very odd. Again, it's one of the peculiarities that if it was still agricultural building, it wouldn't be classed as previously developed land because it's got an equestrian use. It is, but that seems to be the way the law is drafted. But I didn't draft the law. And the other question is on this fence on page 84 of the agenda. We do have a profile of the proposed acoustic fence, and it's admitted that it would affect the openness, and I'm just not sure why that fence really is needed. I know it's because of the motorway noise, but as there seems to be intention to plant on the non-motorway side of the fence, I'm not quite sure why it's strictly necessary, and whether that could be removed.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Parish. Just, I mean, in terms of the fence, so the fence is necessary in the view of our environmental health officer to deal with the noise impact of the motorway noise, and the fence provides that sort of screening that deals with that to ensure that levels are within an acceptable thresholds. Planting alone would not have the same impact in reducing the transfer of noise in effect to within acceptable levels, and that's why there's a need for the fencing to ensure that the levels are within those acceptable limits.
Okay, does that answer your question, Councillor Parish?
Yeah, it answers my question, but as I said, they should put up the motorway noise, but that's another matter.
Okay, can we go on to Councillor Wright? Have you got any comments or questions to officers?
One question. Can you hear me, Joan?
Yes, I can hear you.
Just about the footpaths. I know they said there's a certain level of footpath, and then it stops, and there seems to be a considerable, about 630 metres, I think, where there is no footpath. I've been round there on my bike and stuff now and again, and the roads are pretty narrow, and walking on the road is not a good idea. Are we certain that's not that doesn't need some sort of solution? That's for the traffic officer.
Or Mike, do you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I mean, it's acknowledged basically that the location of the site, it's a rural area, so there are big gaps in the pedestrian infrastructure in terms of connecting Hatton Village itself to the wider area. What we've considered is the fact that the site itself is connected to the settlement of Hatton, and the bus services and whatever facilities are within Hatton, the pub, the phone box, they are limited, obviously, but there is a footpath that connects the site itself with the settlement of Hatton. And given the scale of development, which is 31 dwellings, it would be unreasonable to ask for any significant measures in terms of sort of 600 metres of footway to connect elsewhere.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Right, I can perhaps put in some clarification on that, because we have a similar situation in my ward where the children of Croft have to get to Culcheth High School, and as the situation was a couple of years ago, don't know if it's changed, it's the council's responsibility to make sure those children can get to school safely. So if there is no footpath, then the children have to have bus passes. What the council did was put a footpath in along the road from Croft to Culcheth, and then the free bus passes went if you lived more than 3 miles away. But so that's why I know so much about the situation. But certainly that was the issue then. I don't know if any officers know anything further on that.
I'm afraid I don't know details about the accessibility of providing
Paul, do you know?
Bus passes.
Paul?
Sorry, Chair, I didn't quite. You cut out just as you asked the question.
All right, sorry.
Could you repeat that?
I said in my ward, what happened up till fairly recently was that if there was no safe footpath to the school, then the council had to provide a way for the children to get to school. In fact, they had bus passes, but then the council put in a footway along the road to the school. And from then on, the people who lived less than 3 miles away didn't get the free bus passes. They had to walk. So as I understand it, unless things have changed, the council is obliged to make sure that children have a safe way to get to school. And I asked if you knew anything further on this.
I'm sorry, Councillor, I don't know whether you can hear me, but I didn't catch much of that. I think what I'll try to do is I'll try to phone in.
Okay, perhaps
if you can give me
continue for the moment.
I'll try and dial in and
do it over the telephone. We get to you again.
Can't hear you.
Councillor, I just might be able to assist in some way on this matter. So, not in relation to the issue that you've raised specifically, but just in terms of access to a bus stop. So, if the children needed to get a bus rather than walk to school, then my understanding is that the footpaths are connected from the site to the bus stops. So that in itself wouldn't be an issue. So there's no issues there in terms of safety for children accessing the bus stops. And then the other point to mention there is if the suggestion would be that the council would incur costs as a result of this application, that wouldn't necessarily be material to this decision. And what we'd be looking for, we need to have a look at in terms of what if the alternatives would be reasonable. And Mike has just set out there that to impose conditions requiring additional footpaths to improve connections beyond the Hatton boundary wouldn't be necessary and wouldn't be reasonable in this instance.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
So allows us to move on. Councillor Barr, have you got any comments or questions?
Yes, I'm afraid I have one or two. The first is a very general point. Was this site offered up in the Schlar, and was it one of the sites recommended for removal from the green belt in the latest version of the local plan?
I'll have to come back to you on that, Councillor Barr. I'll try and find the answer out during the course of the meeting, but that's not something I've easily got to hand at the moment.
Okay, because can I just confirm that Matt told us that whilst notionally sustainable, he didn't use the word notionally, I've added the word notionally, but whilst notionally sustainable in terms of accessibility, with 7 buses a day and the really quite bizarre cycle times. Now, if anyone on the committee knows those roads, those are dark rural roads on which traffic speeds because it's recently come off the motorway. I can't imagine anybody allowing their child to cycle to school from this development and feel that child is secure. So I'm really concerned about the report that suggests this is a sustainable location for this type of development.
I think, in terms of addressing the particular thing around the times for the cycling, they were provided clearly as an indication of what is possible. Clearly, the decision about whether or not you'd cycle or not is for an individual, but equally there is that safe route to the bus stop, and there is those bus services that mean that for a site in a rural location, it is reasonably accessible. I think it's also worth thinking about the fact that the NPPF, in effect, in allowing the redevelopment of previously developed land in the green belt, sites that would fall within the criteria of this in terms of being acceptable in principle on that sense, that they are likely to be in rural locations. So I think it's I think when you then come back into that of what's a rural location and what's the sustainability of them, I think the access to services and the access to the bus stops that are provided suggest that this is a reasonably accessible location and for this type of development.
Well, I think we'll have to agree to disagree on that one, because I certainly don't see it as. So can you hear me?
We can hear you, Councillor Barr. Yeah.
Right. Yes. I mean, I certainly do not see this as a sustainable location. I have great sympathy with what my colleagues on the committee have said about how refreshing it is to see affordable housing being provided in such large quantities. But the problem is that if you're going to take people and provide housing which is affordable in perpetuity in an area where they're then almost totally dependent on car access to get to work or to get to school or to get to facilities, that's not doing them a favour. We have a responsibility as a committee to make sure that good placemaking policy is applied, and that we create places, or that we approve places which are going to be good places to live. And I can't see, reading through this report, how this remote rural location, blighted by motorway noise to such an extent that bunds and additional acoustic fencing have to be added, is a sensible place to put people on low incomes. It just does not strike me as being an appropriate location at all, because of its rural aspect. It's one of the most rural corners of Warrington, and it's one of the least accessible corners of Warrington. So I'm afraid I'm going to be strongly against this application.
Nikki?
Hi, Councillor. I just wanted to pick up on a couple of issues there that Councillor Barr raised. I think first of all, he mentioned he referenced whether this application was within the SHLA, and Matt was trying to source that information for you. But I just wanted to clarify that whether it was within the SHLA or whether it isn't, to a certain degree, it's not given significant weight in this decision. So even if it wasn't included within the SHLA, and I expect that you'd want to understand whether it was put forward, whether there are reasons behind that, we do need to consider the application that's submitted before us on its own merits, whether or not it was included within the SHLA. And the follow-up question from that, I think, or the follow-up point from Councillor Barr there, was whether it was identified in the draft local planners to be released from Greenbelt. Now, again, I think Councillor, in the representation from Councillor Harris, she's expressed the view, officers have always confirmed this and concur with this, is that isn't material at this stage. So that's not for consideration at this stage. And what we're looking at here, I think we just need to, is there is a previously developed site, and that's the criteria which we're assessing it against. I just wanted to provide some clarity. Thank you, councillors.
Thank you, Nikki. Chair, may I respond to Nikki's comments?
Certainly.
We have a Secretary of State's determination of another application that was in Appleton Ward. On that occasion, we were told that the fact that the land was going to be removed from Greenbelt in the local plan was a material factor, and it was given as a material factor as one of the strongest reasons that persuaded the committee to approve that application, which has since been turned down. Now, in another corner of the ward, okay, when it comes to a different application, we're being told that no, it's not a material factor. We do need some consistency as to whether emerging policy and whether the Greenbelt determinations that will take place in the local plan are material factors or not. Otherwise, I have to treat this as a material factor in this place, in which case Matt's argument is that even if it is in the Greenbelt, NPPF still says that this is an appropriate development because it's on previously developed land, to which my response is, but it's almost totally unsustainable for the type of residents for whom it's being proposed. So I have great difficulty with the advice we're being given on this application.
Councillor Grime, would you like me to respond?
Yes, certainly, if you would like to.
Yeah, so I believe that I've always been consistent in the advice that I've provided for councillors and for members in this regard. So the draft local plan is at such a stage where it has no significant material weight in the decision making process. It's there in the background. There's some documents that are associated with that, some of the baseline information that may be relevant to some of the decisions that you see come forward, but the plan itself and the policies that are contained within it are not to be given significant weight in the decision-making process.
I'm very grateful for Nikki's clarification and her much clearer stance than her predecessors, because it wasn't under her that we were given the previous advice, which has now been overturned by the Secretary of State. So thank you, Nikki. It's very much appreciated.
I think as well, we have to recognise, in fairness to the officers, that information about how much the draft local plan is relevant, information is built up over situations which we've met, and we now know quite a lot more about it than when we first had to face these difficult decisions because of the very results that we've had from inspectors from different appeals. Anyway, can I move on now to Councillor Carey? Sorry.
So it's okay, Chair.
Can
I was going to ask if I
to
come in, but if you want to carry on, yeah.
Councillor McCarthy would like to come in.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, first of all, I know it's been mentioned by other councillors, but the fact that they're offering 30% of affordable homes, that is welcome. But that withstanding, I know this area well. I certainly know the lane. I was somewhat surprised at the point made by the traffic officer, because it is very, very rural, and the impact of 31 homes there and the impact that will have on the road will be massive. And like I say, no harp on about site visits, but anybody who didn't know the lane and went and had a look, they would see what I'm talking about. It is extremely rural. There's quite a number of questions there that's been raised by the objects that I don't think we've had full answers to. The question, the bus service, the regularity of it, the walking distance, etc. Health and safety in terms of the children walking along there with lack of footpath, lack of lighting, because it is extremely rural. I'd like a bit more information on that. But one thing has sort of puzzled me, that all we received from the 21 people notified was 7 objections, and I found that somewhat strange. But I just felt this is a massive impact on what is an extremely rural area. But I'd like some, people have raised the question of the facilities, the infrastructure, what is lacking, and what impact this will have on the current facilities. I'd like a bit more information on that, please. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can we start with traffic? Can you comment first?
Thanks, Chair. Yeah. All the comments made by Councillor McCarthy and Councillor Barr are acknowledged. It is a rural location. There's no getting away from that. You're in the heart of the country there. There's 2 aspects at looking at sustainable development. One is the definition of sustainable development, which is the planning side, which is outlined in the NPPF, and I'm paraphrasing, but it's meeting the needs of the present without compromising the needs of future generations. And in respect to that, it looks at economic, social and environmental issues. In a transport point of view, it's looking to reduce the need for private car wherever possible. And when we do look at that, we look at the accessibility of the site. But the accessibility of a site everywhere isn't equal. Obviously, a city or a town has greater accessibility options and availabilities than a suburban area and a more rural area and a village. We come down and down the scale. And so when we look at the highways issues of it, we have to look at the ability to promote sustainable transport and reduce the need for the private car use. But we have to take into account the type of the development and the location of that development where it is. We also look at the safe and suitable access and the impact on the network. Now, in terms of the safe and suitable access, we're getting an improved access layout with visibility displays that meet required standards. The internal layout is fine in terms of service and in terms of meeting parking standards. In terms of impact on the network, it's 31 dwellings, but it's on a site that's already generated traffic, so that the net impact isn't as great as just 31 dwellings generating traffic. There's been some traffic generated out of there. And in terms of the accessibility, when we've looked at this, the nearest facilities available are the bus service at Hatton Village and the settlement of Hatton Village and there is a footpath link through to that. And what we've sought is for the existing street lighting that covers Hatton Village to be extended to cover up to the main B road up to the site access point. So in our all the comments are totally acknowledged. It's a rural location. There's no getting away from that. Anyone who lives there is going to rely on the car largely. But given the fact it's a development in a rural location, we don't feel there's any grounds for highways objection.
Okay, thank you. Any comments from Nikki?
Yeah. Sorry.
I think Councillor McCarthy wanted to respond, Chair.
Okay.
If I may, I would just be interested in what statistics you have regarding the current traffic impact as the land is at the moment, and what 31 homes would have. I'm not quite sure how you square the circle on that. I mean, what impact is it having as this, you know, the riding school? But what's traffic flow and impact onto that road now set against 31 homes? Because I don't see the comparison.
Do you want me to respond, Chair?
Yes, please.
Thanks, Councillor. I appreciate what you're saying, but again, we're looking at the scale of development. It's 31 dwellings. It doesn't trigger the need for any capacity assessments. So it's very much based on our officer judgment when we're looking at it. Now, I know in some respects that the figure of 31 dwellings, everyone sees that everyone's going to have 2 cars, so therefore there's 62 cars at the site. But in real terms, the impact of movements out of that site, that's not what the site generates in the peak hour. We would expect a development of 31 dwellings in a rural location like this, which is car reliant, to generate something like 24 vehicle movements in the peak hour. Now that's at the site entrance. Now typically, again, because there's no detail provided with the application, we have to make a judgment, but typically there's a 60-40 split in the way those movements go to. So 14 will go one way, 10 will go the other. And so when we look at that, we use our judgment to assess the impact on the network. And again, it boils back to the scale of development. It's 31 dwellings. The site itself, as a livery centre, as a whatever else was there, it has generated traffic. Certainly looking from Google photographs of the site, you know, you can see heavy vehicles parked up on the site. So there's traffic movement being generated from that site. I don't have the detail of the level of that, but certainly the level of traffic that we would expect for 31 dwellings isn't extreme.
Okay, do you want to come back to that, Councillor McCarthy?
Well, just to say, perhaps before I retire next May, Mike and I'll agree on something, but not this evening.
Chair.
Sorry, I've unmuted. Have you got any comments, Nikki, in response to Councillor McCarthy?
I think Mike has just given a very comprehensive answer there, so I haven't got anything further to add unless Councillor McCarthy's got any further questions.
Matt, have you got any comments?
No, nothing else to add, Chair.
Okay.
Chair.
Yes.
May I raise the issue that you raised, which is what is the journey to school going to be for children living on this development? Because at the moment, the bus services do not appear to coincide with school times at all. So the existing bus services cannot be used to get to school or to get back from school sensibly. As Councillor McCarthy pointed out, and I have, anyone who knows these roads knows that these are not cycle-friendly roads. So what is the proposed means of access to school for all the children that will be living on this development?
We'll go back to Mike.
Thanks, Chair. Good question, Councillor. It's highly likely that the majority of kids, and I'm speaking honestly and candidly here, it's highly likely the majority of kids will be going to school by private car because of the location of that site. But the site itself is no less inaccessible than the rest of the settlement of Hatton, which does have a bus service which connects to this site with a footpath to this site. And I know the issue of school transport in rural areas was raised earlier. I know it's one that our specialist transport section deal with, and I don't know whether they actually provide a bespoke service to Hatton Village as is that this site could connect to. I genuinely don't know that, but it boils back to the issue that I referenced before. We have to take account of the nature of the development and its location. I will acknowledge this isn't effectively a rural area. You know, it's not a highly accessible location, but as I said earlier, every area has a level of accessibility, and it's relative to where it is. If this site were located, if this site were located, I don't know, a quarter of a mile away to the west, where it is more remote from Hatton, and it was of a nature, and there's no connection to the settlement itself, then we may raise an accessibility argument. But taking this application where it is, the application for what it is, we don't feel we can raise an accessibility argument.
May I just ask one more question, Chair? May I ask one more question? Oh, I can't hear the chair. You're muted.
That's because my computer keeps putting itself back on mute. I beg your pardon. Certainly, you can ask another question.
One more question. And how should we take into account the interaction between the difficulty of access to this rural location and the acceptance from Mike that it's likely to be largely car-based, and the offer of 1/3 of the homes being affordable in perpetuity? So most of the residents of Hatton who moved into Hatton so far, and again, there's a shortage of affordable property in Hatton, but it may well be simply because it is someone who's having difficulty in paying for their house is also going to have difficulty in paying to drive to and to drive their children to and from a rural location. I can't see there's an interaction between there must be an interaction between those two, and if we are going to provide affordable housing, surely it's our responsibility to provide it in sustainable locations.
Yeah,
just who wants to come back to that, Matt?
I can respond to that in the first instance, Councillor Graham. Yeah, thank you. I think it's important on the affordable housing to be clear that we'd fully expect as part of the Section 106 agreement that the affordable housing would be administered by a registered provider. That's the sort of normal practice around affordable housing, and they would be required to identify potential occupants for that affordable housing based on our normal expectations. But there is an element of choice to this. Whilst there's affordable housing will be provided, people aren't automatically assigned, and therefore they have no choice of whether they want to go and live in those locations. So there is, if there was the opportunity for somebody to decide that it wasn't suitable for them in this location, then they do have a choice. It's not just that they're assigned the affordable house property.
Thank you.
I think I'd just like to add something as well, Chair, if I can. Chair.
Chair's muted.
It looks like you may have froze.
Okay, if I can just add something, and that's just in terms of affordable housing generally. I think we're looking. I'm looking at how you're perceiving these issues, and my perception is that it's not necessarily in terms of the principle of green belt and the development on previously developed land. It comes down to whether there is ultimately going to be an issue with highway safety as a result of this, and that people may travel, people may be forced to travel by other alternative means other than private car, because their options are more limited with particular regard to affordable housing. And I think one of the reasons why we seek to provide affordable housing is not because people can't necessarily, it is obviously associated with affordability, but it allows people to manage themselves and their requirements better. So just because people may be living in a registered provider house wouldn't necessarily mean that all their income would go in that direction, and then they wouldn't have a car. A lot of people do have cars. They're associated with just general travel to work, etc. So I don't think, there are some instances, and we do see it, where there is a reduced amount of car ownership, or we allow for a reduced amount of car ownership, where we see large areas of affordable housing come forward. But there is an expectation that some car ownership would be associated with the site and those affordable properties, and that has been taken into account in the design that has been put before you today. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Can you hear me, by the way? Because things have been breaking up from my point of view. You can hear me now.
We can, thank you, Chair.
I think we need to move on. Can I ask Councillor Carey, has he got any comments or questions?
Yes, Chair. It's ironic, really, that we've sat here for 2 hours discussing 2 applications in the Greenbelt, both involving a riding establishment, and with such different appraisals. One very enthusiastic for it, and the other one less than enthusiastic. It's just ironic, that side. I don't make any more comments on that. I think this particular area is probably the smallest settlement we've got in a rural area in the borough. It's certainly, from my point of view, is somewhere you blink and you've already gone through it when you're travelling up to Hatton. And it is very, very rural, with rural infrastructure, not really suitable for a new small housing estate such as this, I would have thought. So from that point of view, I'm not overly enthusiastic about the application. One comment that was made earlier caught my attention, and that was the fact that this development is to replace an existing riding establishment, but that if it had been agricultural buildings, its status would have been different in terms of whether we would recommend approval. Can we say categorically what the current planning status of this site is? Has it been approved as a riding establishment, or is it a bit vague?
Nikki or Matt? Whichever.
Matt, do you want to respond on that?
Yeah, I am just gonna pull up as part of the application, the applicant has submitted an affidavit that confirms that the site is in equestrian use. I'm just going to pull back on the there's also in the planning history that's set out in the report that there's a number of plan applications, particularly in 2003, that relates to the proposed use for equestrian uses. So I think that we as officers, we are satisfied that it is an equestrian use, and therefore the MPPF, the way that we've assessed the MPPF in the report is correct.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Flaherty, do you have any comments or questions?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right. We've had a lot of discussion. I'll run through again see if people want to make perhaps a different point to what they've made before. I know that some members are not very satisfied with the answers they've got, but just new points, please. Councillor Friend.
Nothing further, thank you, Chair.
Okay. Councillor McCarthy.
Nothing further, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Nothing, Chair.
Councillor Mundry.
Nothing, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
Chair, just a bit conflicted over the whole principles. Can I just ask the officers though? I mean, Hatton's unusual because it's rural, but it's not that remote. And obviously there's a big issue in really rural areas about affordable housing and schemes which, to make them viable do include market value housing as well as affordable housing, and affordable rural housing is quite an issue. Sorry? Quite an issue in those areas. There's the rural exception areas. Is this Is that a feature which will be applicable to this, or are we treating it just differently because of the previous development?
Yeah, that doesn't apply. Doesn't apply to this. It's a consideration of, as set out in the officer's report around the green belt and then meeting an identified affordable housing need in the borough.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I was looking at 936 in the report. Very little social housing in the south of the borough, and you know it does seem an issue. So yeah, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Wright, have you any further questions or comments?
No further questions or comments, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Barr, anything new?
No further comments, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Carey?
Nothing further, Chair.
Okay. Councillor Flaherty?
No, thank you, Chair.
Right. Anyone else at all wish to make any further comments, either members or officers? Councillor Barr?
I would be willing to move to a motion.
Councillor Morgan?
Sorry, Chair, it's Paul Prisby speaking. Can I just ask, did you get an answer to your question earlier?
Yes, Nikki gave us an answer.
Okay,
sorry, I should have commented that. Councillor Morgan?
Question, Chair. Is this still being run as an equestrian facility? And if not, when did it cease to become an equestrian facility?
Matt, can you answer that?
Yeah. Just bear me a second. I believe that it is still in use as an equestrian business. Nikki, do you have any further information on that?
It is within the report, so if you can just bear with me. Just bear with me, I'll just check that for you. I must admit that my impression was different to Matt's. I didn't think it was I didn't think it was any longer operational. I'm sorry, I just can't see that there at the moment, but I didn't think it was it was operational any longer.
My further question to that would be if it's still operating and this application were refused, would it still continue as an equestrian operation?
We would have no guarantees over that at all. So even if it was in use, I mean, potentially, you know, if we take it as the point that it is in use, I don't think it is, but if it is, then that use could cease at any time in any case, and the site could be left vacant. If the site is vacant at the moment, in theory, a similar use could move into those premises in the future.
Okay, thank you, Nikki. So you don't see any evidence that it's still operating?
From my recollections, and I'm desperately trying to look through the report here, but from my recollection, it isn't operational at the moment.
Okay, thank you.
May I have a clarification, please?
Pardon?
May I ask Nikki for a clarification on that, please?
Yes, go on.
It's the previously developed land issue. And I know that certainly on controversial developments in Lymm, a planning inspector spent an incredible amount of time working out which polytunnel was previously developed land and which bit of grass wasn't. If it's not currently in use as equestrian land, does the fact that it has been used as an equestrian site in the past make it previously developed land in perpetuity? Or is the assumption that the agricultural use is what determines the current status of the land?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting and good point. Thank you, Councillor. Well, I think that relates to it. If it is in use or it isn't in use, what kind of materiality does that have in this instance? And the answer is it doesn't. It is still previously developed land.
Thank you.
Right. Can we wind up the discussion there? Is anyone else need to make a further comment before they can decide how they will vote? Okay. So I know that Councillor Barr wants to make a proposal, but I think considering the balance of arguments, which perhaps have been balanced, I will first try this one out. I propose the motion that the application is approved subject to conditions, including condition 27 in the update and a section 106 obligation. Is anyone prepared to second that motion?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Friend.
Councillor Friend will second, and then we'll see how the voting goes. But
Chair,
first of all, does
Chair.
anyone want to make an amendment?
Chair, it's just Councillor Parish. There was a comment from one of the objectors about what happens to the orchard, and I couldn't see anything in the conditions about future maintenance of that public space. How does that get guaranteed for future maintenance of the public space?
Matt, have you any comments?
Yeah, I'm just having a quick look, Chair. I think that one of the conditions in the update report deals with that in a bit more detail. Just bear with me a second.
Okay.
Okay, can we accept that that is included in the conditions and go on to vote on the proposed and seconded motion? Is that okay with you, Steve?
Well, I was just hoping we'd get clarification on that, Chair.
Condition 20, is it? Condition 20.
Just bear with me 1 second, just scanning through the report now.
We'll make it a condition if it's not.
Well,
Condition 20 refers to a planting scheme.
I think it's condition 17, Chair.
It mentions the orchard.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, it's condition 17.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Right, so we move to the vote then. Jenny, if you can take the vote.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr,
Against.
Councillor Carey,
Against.
Councillor Flaherty,
Against.
Councillor Friend,
For.
Councillor Grime,
For.
Councillor McCarthy,
Against.
Councillor Morgan,
Against.
Councillor Mundry,
Against.
Councillor Parish,
For.
and Councillor Wright.
Against.
Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 7. So that's 7 votes against the proposal and only 3 for the proposal. Therefore, the proposal has not been agreed.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Barr, can I ask you to make a proposal?
I propose that the application should be refused on the grounds of the sustainability of this greenbelt location for the proposed development.
Okay.
I would welcome
Nikki,
the advice as to whether the wording of that is helpful or appropriate.
Nikki, is that an acceptable reason? Are we okay there?
Apologies, Councillor Grime, had a lighting technical error here. I had to go and deal with, and I missed that. I'm afraid, Councillor Barr, could you just repeat that?
Yes, yes. The proposal is to refuse the application on the grounds of the unsustainability of this location in the greenbelt for the development proposed.
Okay.
Is there a case, Chair? Is there a case for adding openness? Because openness is, as we heard earlier, an open textured thing, and if just one reason for refusal is a bit thin.
Yep.
Just wonder whether we might disagree with the officers on the effect on the openness of the greenbelt.
Councillor Barr, what's your view?
I'm very happy to add openness, but I would welcome advice from Nikki and Paul.
Okay. Nikki?
So in terms of its unsustainable location, first of all, I think it would be useful to have a little bit more clarity about that. So Mike, I think, did a very good job earlier in describing what we term by unsustainable. Now, this is reuse of previously developed land, and in that sense, there is an element of sustainability to it. I think what you're talking about there is the connectivity to other sites. Now, it does connect. Arguably, and this might be an issue that you want to pick up on, arguably it connects well to Hatton. So anybody living within these areas who working or had family, for example, within Hatton, it is well connected to that village at the moment. If you mean to surrounding areas, and if it's by public means other than public transport, means other than private car, I think just a little bit more detail on that would help.
It's the fact that this is proposed to be effectively family housing. It's very different in character to the existing character of Hatton, and it is. I think that it's clear from all the advice we've had from officers that this will be an entirely car-dependent location. That whilst theoretical access by walking or by bus or by cycle has been cited, I don't think the committee has accepted that those are likely to be means that people would use to live sustainably within the development. There's one other minor aspect of sustainability which concerns me, which is the references to the constant motorway noise that will be at the site and the measures that will need to be taken in order to mitigate that, but not remove it altogether.
So if you want me to come back on those,
yeah, yes, please.
So in terms of being a car dependent location, now we have identified other alternative means, and I don't want to push the points. I know you've heard all the responses today, but in the event that this goes to appeal, these arguments will be played out. So just so you're fully aware of the situation. There are bush routes, there are families living within the village at the moment, and there is connections within the village. Now, in terms of it saying not sustainable location, then it seems that we're looking at whether, I suppose what I'm looking for is a bit of clarity over then, okay, what is the harm associated with that? Everything ultimately needs to, when we're looking at planning issues, well, where is the harm? Is the harm in terms of its environmental impacts, 31 dwellings, or is the harm in terms of highway safety? Is that your concern? Where is the harm?
The harm is about the residential, about the highway safety, but it's also the NPPF and the officers were explaining to us that the sustainability does depend on accessibility. Now, where we differ, the advice you're giving me is yes, there are 7 buses a day into Warrington. My counter argument is that would not satisfy families with children, and the highways officer tells us that yes, realistically this will be an entirely car-based development, and it's that aspect of its sustainability that is the grounds for the refusal. Entirely is probably the wrong word. A massively car-based location, because as other councillors on the committee have recognised, anyone who knows Hatton and knows this area well knows that the idea that you're going to be able to access this development by walking or cycling or using the bus on a regular basis is being wildly optimistic.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We seem to be repeating the arguments that we had in the
From my
discussion. We have got a motion to reject. Can we see if this is passed, and then perhaps Bob and Nikki could consult about the wording of the reasons. I think we've all got the actual hang of why Bob is proposing rejection. We could just go round in circles on this for a few more hours, I think.
Nikki has some advice.
Would that be acceptable for Bob and Nikki to sort this? Nikki?
I think from my perspective, Councillor Barr's clarification there has been really useful, because as officers, what we need to do if we're looking at an appeal situation is just dig under the reasons why that has been stated. So the clarification that's been provided has been really useful. And I think the other issue that you raised, Councillor Barr, was openness, and you wanted a little bit more clarification on openness and how this relates to a possible reason for refusal on greenbelt grounds, I think. Is that correct?
Yes.
And for in relation to that, I would ask Matt for some further advice.
Matt.
Yeah, thank you.
Matt, are you on mute, Matt?
Your mic's off, Matt.
It is on mute.
I am. Apologies.
Yes.
Apologies. There we are. It is so. As I said in my presentation at the beginning of the item, the Greenbelt case is set out obviously in the National Planning Policy Framework, and the particular bullet that officers felt was satisfied as part of this proposal was that the development would not cause substantial harm to openness of the Greenbelt, where as you mentioned before, previously developed land was involved, and also there's an identified affordable housing need. So I suppose it's that not cause substantial harm to the openness. So if members were minded to have a different view about whether or not the development did cause substantial harm to the Greenbelt, that is a decision they could come to. Obviously, as I've said before, officers are minded that test isn't achieved. We do think that it's not causing substantial harm, but that is something members could consider further.
Okay, so do you want to?
I'm happy to stick to the sustainability and access argument that Nikki now has paraphrased much more elegantly for us, and I'm sure she'll come up with a form of words. I'm grateful to Steve Parish for raising the openness one, but I'm loath to add something which might easily get knocked down as appeal.
Okay, thank you. So are we ready? Oh, have we got a seconder for the motion?
I'll second it, Chair. Councillor Tony McCarthy.
Okay, thank you. So it's proposed and seconded.
Chair,
Any amendments?
So, Chair, sorry, it's Paul Cleary speaking. Yes, so I mean, clearly members have to know what they're voting on. That doesn't necessarily mean that the wording has to be there absolutely in detail, but you know, it is the case that that members do have to understand the reason for refusal, which I think has been articulated.
Yes, I think so. Would you agree with that, Nikki? Are you happy that you've got the reason?
So what I've captured in essence is that the application, by means of its unsustainable location, and its focus upon family housing, would lead to a development which is largely significantly dependent on car ownership and private travel, to the detriment of highway safety. So something that incorporates those principles.
That's very helpful, Nikki. I'm happy with that.
Okay.
Okay. And Tony, are you happy with that as well?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. Okay. Any amendments?
I would have thrown in whether all the buildings are in equestrian use, but I think that would complicate it even further.
Thank you, Steve. Don't do that.
Yes.
Okay, can we hand over to Democratic Services to take the vote?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
For.
Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Flaherty?
For.
Councillor Friend?
Against.
Councillor Grime?
Abstain.
Councillor McCarthy?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Parish?
Against.
And Councillor Wright?
Against.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So we have 6 votes for refusal, 1, 2, 3 against and 1 abstention. So the application has been refused.
Thank you. So we go on to agenda item 5, the appeal decision summary. The report is attached to the agenda starting on page 91, 4 appeals have been decided and 1 received since the previous report. Does the planning officer wish to make any additional comment?
I've got no comments unless anybody's got any queries. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any questions from members? Councillor Barr?
No questions. I just welcome the Secretary of State's decision.
Thank you. Councillor Carey?
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Flaherty?
No comment, Chair.
Councillor Friend?
No comment, Chair.
Councillor McCarthy?
Do we know, Chair, whether or not has it come out whether they're going to be challenging this decision? Because my mind drifts back to the Satnam application over at Councillor Friend's ward, where the Secretary of State seemed to have changing views from time to time. So I'm not quite sure this is a battle won but not the war, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Nikki, have you got any further information?
I'm not aware of any challenge at this point, but they will have 6 weeks from the date that the decision was made to launch a challenge.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan, have you any questions?
No questions, Chair.
Councillor Mundry?
No questions, Chair.
Councillor Parish?
Not at this time of night, Chair, no.
Councillor Wheeler?
Yes, Chair, sorry, I'm still here. Since the Stobart refusal, we've had significant developments which Matt will know about with the proposed lorry park at, literally a couple of 100 yards away from where Stobart's proposal was. Will that have any significance on the appeal if Stobart's do go to appeal?
Matt, have you any ideas?
Yeah, I suppose it's just to clarify on the process, Councillor Wheeler. So the Stobart appeal, obviously that has been dismissed by the Secretary of State. So that, unless it's challenged, that's a case closed. So in effect, the SDO will be considered on its merits in the knowledge that the Eddie Stobart's appeal was dismissed by the Secretary of State.
Sorry, I was coming at it from the other way round. That if Stobart's appeal will the effect that we now have a lorry park influence the decision on whether Stobart's would have a successful.
You want me to answer that, Matt?
Yeah, go on, Paul. Yeah, of course.
Okay, so if there is a judicial review challenge of the Secretary of State's decision, then clearly the decision was based on the circumstances at the time of the decision, and therefore, as far as I would understand it, there would be no account taken of subsequent developments in the area. But clearly, if there were to be a reapplication or a further application, then the changed circumstances of the area would come into effect to some degree. But,
Okay,
I can't say what effect that would be. I mean, obviously, what you've got is a potentially a temporary use, haven't you, for a lorry park during the sort of during the Brexit period.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Any further comments, Judith?
No, that's fine. Thank you, Chair.
Councillor Wright?
No
Sorry,
comment.
Nikki?
I just looking for clarity really over Councillor Wheeler's comments. Councillor Wheeler, are you referring there to the lorry park, or are you referring to the inland border point?
The inland board, yeah, the inland border known as the lorry park. Sorry, we should refer to it by its proper title. It's colloquially known as the lorry park.
Right, so can I provide some information on that? So from previous briefings that we had, we were involved in engagement with the applicants on that. We've moved beyond that stage now, so we have submitted our response to them for inclusion with their submission to government that approves the details or otherwise, not perhaps potentially, of that scheme. That was submitted to government on Friday. This decision for Stobart's was released before that submission, and therefore that submission will have been adapted to take into account the fact that this appeal, so that the Stobart's decision. Does that clarify?
Okay.
Yes, it does.
Councillor Wright, have you any comments?
No comments, Chair.
Okay. Does anyone else, either members or officers, wish to make any further comments or clarifications? Okay, I propose the appeal summary report is accepted. Councillor Carey, can you second that? Okay. So can I hand over to Democratic Services to take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
For.
Councillor Carey?
For.
Councillor Flatty?
For.
Councillor Friend?
For.
Councillor Grime?
For.
Councillor McCarthy?
For.
Councillor Morgan?
For.
Councillor Mundry?
For.
Councillor Parish?
For.
Councillor Wheeler?
For.
Councillor Wright?
For.
Thank you. The update report's noted. Thank you.
Right, and last but not least, agenda item 6, the November review of the revised operating procedures for DMC. And the report is attached to the agenda, starting on page 237. Does the planning officer wish to make any additional comment?
Just a couple of points to draw out, really, Councillor. So this report is a result of the decision by members in August to carry on operating remotely on a 3-weekly cycle to be reviewed by the end of November. So we're bringing it to you before that expires. Looking at a situation now where within the report, the suggestion is that we continue operating on a 3-weekly basis. But we continue that now until no later than the 7th of May without a further review. The 7th of May coincides with the requirements under, well, the details within the Coronavirus Act, which you referred to in your opening of the meeting, which allows for us to hold remote meetings. So that's that piece of legislation that allows us to do that expires at that point. So this will draw our meetings in line with that piece of legislation. It also requests that the delegations, we've got delegated powers at the moment for specified items, and they are to the Director of Growth, and where that's not feasible, they are to be directed to the Deputy Chief Exec, and in both instances in consultation with the Chief Exec, unless he has a specified interest. And what I am seeking in the current report is that these delegations are authorised to be passed down further so that they would sit with me. And the reason for that is just, if we remember right back to May, when we first raised these issues, one of the things that we were looking at to achieving from this process is resource efficiencies for officers. Now, at the moment, the structure that it needs to go through internally to get to Director and Deputy Chief Exec, there are numerous steps to get to that process. Whereas if they sat with me, and obviously it's my recommendation, I will be overseeing those decisions that go out, it just simplifies those processes for us and just takes a little bit more pressure off resource-wise, which we are feeling significantly at the moment. So just wanted to make that clear. Over to you. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. Are there any questions from members? Councillor Barr.
No, I'd just like to comment. I'm happy with Nicky's proposal. I think that efficient functioning of the committee is important, and in practice we know that the Director of Growth would have acted on Nicky's advice almost all the time, so I don't think we're losing anything. I think we're just speeding things up, making things more efficient.
Thank you, Councillor Carey.
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Friend.
No comments.
Thank you, Councillor Flaherty.
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Morgan.
No comments.
Councillor McCarthy.
I have no comment, Chair.
Councillor Mundry.
No comments, Chair.
Councillor Parish.
No comment, Chair.
Councillor Wheeler.
No comments, Chair, but I would like to say that the briefings that we've been having have been very useful, and obviously I'd like those to continue.
Thank you. Any further points of clarification from officers?
No, thank you, Chair.
I propose the review report is accepted. Councillor Barr, would you like to second that?
I'm happy to second that, Chair.
Thank you. Can I ask Democratic Services to take the vote?
Thank you, Chair. Councillor Barr?
4.
Councillor Carey?
4.
Councillor Flaherty?
4.
Councillor Friend?
4.
Councillor Grime?
4.
Councillor McCarthy?
4.
Councillor Morgan?
4.
Councillor Mundry?
4.
Councillor Parish?
4.
Councillor Wheeler?
4.
And Councillor Wright?
4.
Thank you. The report is agreed as per the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you all for your very hard.
We've lost you, Joan.
Gone from exhaustion, I think.
Well, as Vice Chair of the committee, on the assumption that Joan's not coming back in immediately, I'll close the meeting.
Excellent work.
Hey!
There she is.
Thank you.
We lost you, Joan.
We lost you, Joe.
A vote of thanks to the Chair. Well done.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks to everybody and good
My
night.
screen froze for a few minutes then, so I didn't know where we were up to. But let's all hang up and say good night.
Night,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you,
Good night, everyone.
Night.
Nikki, are you still there?
Yep.